The bruises on Sarah's arms had turned from purple to a sickly yellow. She traced them with trembling fingers as she sat on the edge of the bed, listening to her husband's heavy footsteps downstairs. 3 years. 3 years of walking on eggshells, of carefully chosen words, of trying to be invisible. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, casting shadows that seemed to mock her trapped existence. Thomas had been different when they met. Charming, attentive, promising her a life of comfort in their Boston townhouse. But the mask had slipped 6 months after their wedding. First came the criticism, her cooking, her clothes, her friends. Then the isolation, cutting her off from everyone who loved her. Finally came the violence, escalating with each passing month until she barely recognized the frightened woman staring back at her from the mirror. Last night had been the worst. His rage over a poorly cooked roast had left her with bruised ribs and a split lip. As she cowered in the corner, something inside her finally broke. Not her spirit, but her fear. She had spent the dark hours making a decision that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. She would leave, even if it killed her. Because staying would surely kill her first. Sarah had been secretly saving money for months, hiding coins and small bills in a hollowed-out book on the shelf. $43.60. It wasn't much, but it was enough to buy a train ticket west. She had heard stories of the territories, of wide-open spaces where a person could disappear and start fresh. The very thought seemed like a fantasy, but fantasy was all she had left. She waited until Thomas left for his office at the shipping company. Her hands shook as she pulled the worn carpet bag from the closet. She packed quickly, taking only essentials, 2 dresses, undergarments, her mother's silver locket, and the precious money from her hiding place. Every sound made her jump. Every creak of the house felt like an accusation. She was betraying her vows, she knew. But those vows had promised love and honor, and Thomas had destroyed both long ago. The walk to the train station felt eternal. Sarah kept her head down, her bonnet pulled low over her face to hide the evidence of last night's brutality. The ticket master barely glanced at her as she purchased passage to Omaha. From there, she would figure out her next move. All that mattered was distance, miles and miles between her and the man who had turned her life into a nightmare. The train lurched forward with a shriek of steam and metal. Sarah pressed her face to the window, watching Boston disappear behind her. With every mile, she felt the iron bands around her chest loosen slightly. But fear still gnawed at her. What would she do when the money ran out? How would she survive alone in the wilderness? She had no skills beyond housekeeping, no connections, no plan beyond escape. 3 days later, dusty and exhausted, Sarah stepped off the train in Omaha. The city bustled with activity. Traders, soldiers, pioneers heading west with wagon trains. She spent $2 precious on a room at a boarding house and lay awake that first night, listening to unfamiliar sounds. Freedom, she discovered, was terrifying. But it was also the first breath of clean air she had taken in years. She found work washing dishes at a hotel, but the pay barely covered her room. The other women whispered about her bruises, about the haunted look in her eyes. Sarah kept to herself, speaking to no one, trusting no one. Until the day she overheard 2 traders discussing their journey into Lakota territory. They needed someone to help with cooking and mending on the trail. The pay was minimal, but it included food and transport farther west. Sarah approached them with her heart hammering. This was madness. She would be traveling into Indian country, a place Boston society had taught her to fear. But Boston society had also taught her to obey her husband, and look where that had led. Sometimes survival meant choosing between dangers and hoping you picked the lesser one. The wagon train departed on a crisp morning in late spring. Sarah had signed on with a group of 12 traders heading into the Black Hills region to exchange goods with the Lakota tribes. The leader, a grizzled man named Buck Morrison, had looked at her skeptically when she applied. Women on these expeditions were rare, but his regular cook had taken ill, and desperation made him willing to take a chance. Sarah quickly proved her worth. She rose before dawn to start the cooking fires, prepared meals that stretched their supplies, and mended torn clothing and canvas with neat, efficient stitches. The men treated her with cautious respect, perhaps sensing that she carried wounds deeper than any visible scar. She never spoke of her past, and they never asked. On the frontier, everyone was running from something. The landscape transformed as they traveled. Rolling prairies gave way to rugged hills and dense pine forests. Sarah had never seen such vastness, such untouched beauty. Despite the harsh conditions and constant uncertainty, something inside her began to shift. The weight she had carried for so long started to feel lighter. Out here, with endless sky above and wild country stretching in every direction, Thomas seemed like a distant nightmare rather than an inescapable reality. They had been traveling for 3 weeks when they entered Lakota territory. Buck was confident in his relationship with the local tribes. He had been trading with them for nearly a decade. But Sarah noticed the increased tension among the men, the way they checked their weapons more frequently. She had heard terrible stories about Indian savages, tales of violence and bloodshed that had filled Boston newspapers. Yet something about those stories had always felt incomplete, like hearing only one side of a complex truth. The first time Sarah saw a Lakota hunting party in the distance, her breath caught. They moved across the landscape with a fluid grace that seemed almost supernatural, perfectly at home in this wild country. Buck raised his hand in greeting, and after a tense moment, the hunters approached. The leader spoke with Buck in a mixture of English and hand signs, negotiating trade terms. Sarah tried not to stare, but she found herself fascinated despite her fear. One of the younger warriors noticed her watching. His eyes met hers across the distance, and Sarah quickly looked away, her face burning. But not before she caught something unexpected in his expression, not threat or hostility, but curiosity mixed with something else she couldn't quite identify. That brief moment haunted her as they made camp that evening. 2 days later, they reached a large Lakota encampment near a river valley. The sight took Sarah's breath away. Dozens of teepees stretched across the meadow, smoke rising from cooking fires, children playing along the riverbank, women working on hides and beadwork. It was a complete, thriving community, nothing like the savage camp she had imagined from those newspaper stories. Buck led them to the chief's lodge for formal greetings. Sarah hung back with the wagons, but her eyes were drawn to the tall figure who emerged to welcome the traders. He wore his authority with quiet confidence, his bearing dignified and commanding. This was Chief Makawee, Buck explained quietly, a leader respected even among the whites for his wisdom and fairness. But it was the man standing slightly behind the chief who captured Sarah's attention. The same young warrior who had met her eyes 2 days before. His name, she learned later from Buck's translator, was Lakota, meaning friend to everyone. He was the chief's nephew and one of the tribe's most skilled hunters. He was also clearly interested in the white woman who had arrived with the trading party. Sarah felt his gaze on her throughout the day as she prepared meals and helped unpack trade goods. It should have frightened her. Instead, it stirred something she had thought Thomas had destroyed forever, a flutter of awareness, of possibility. That evening, as the traders shared a meal with their hosts, Lakota approached. He spoke limited English, but his meaning was clear. He wanted to know her name, where she came from, why she traveled with the traders. Sarah answered carefully, revealing nothing of her flight from Boston, of the bruises that had finally faded. But somehow, looking into his dark eyes, she sensed he understood anyway. That he recognized something in her damaged spirit because he had seen damage before and knew its marks. The trading party stayed at the Lakota encampment for 5 days. Buck had goods the tribe wanted: metal tools, cloth, sugar, coffee, and the Lakota had furs and beadwork prized by traders. Sarah watched the negotiations with interest, noting how different they were from the cutthroat business dealings she had witnessed in Boston. Here, trades were made with careful consideration, with ritual and respect. Both sides sought fairness, understanding that their relationship extended beyond this single exchange. Lakota appeared each day, finding excuses to be near Sarah as she worked. He brought her a bundle of firewood one morning, fresh prairie turnips another afternoon. His English was halting, but he was patient with her complete lack of Lakota. They communicated through gestures, simple words, and something deeper than language. Sarah found herself looking forward to these encounters, feeling a warmth she had not experienced in years. On the 3rd day, Lakota's sister Winona approached Sarah while she was washing clothes at the river. The young woman was close to Sarah's age, with a quick smile and intelligent eyes. She spoke better English than her brother, having learned from missionaries years before. Winona seemed genuinely curious about Sarah, asking questions about her life, her journey. For the first time since fleeing Boston, Sarah felt the stirring of something like friendship. Winona must have sensed Sarah's loneliness because she began spending time with her each day. She showed Sarah how Lakota women prepared food, tanned hides, created beautiful quillwork designs. The tasks were different from anything Sarah had known, but there was satisfaction in learning new skills, in feeling capable and strong. The Lakota women treated her with kind curiosity, and several tried to teach her basic words in their language. Sarah felt herself relaxing in ways she had forgotten were possible. Lakota's interest did not go unnoticed. Winona teased her brother good-naturedly, but she also spoke seriously to Sarah one evening. Among the Lakota, she explained, courtship was a respected process. If Dakota wished to pursue Sarah, he would do so with honor and patience. No woman was forced or rushed. The choice would always be Sarah's. The words brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Choice. The concept felt revolutionary after years of having every decision stripped away. Buck noticed the developing situation with concern. On the fourth evening, he pulled Sarah aside for a serious conversation. He had seen white women join Lakota families before, he told her. Some had found happiness, but it was a hard life, drastically different from anything she had known. She would be giving up her world entirely. Did she understand what she might be choosing? Sarah considered his words carefully. What world would she be giving up? A life of fear and violence? A society that had taught her to submit and endure? She had no family to return to, no home waiting for her. The money in her bag would run out soon, leaving her stranded in Omaha with no prospects. But more than practical concerns, something deeper pulled at her. In the short time she had spent among the Lakota, she had felt more seen and valued than in all her years with Thomas. These people judged her on her actions, not on her ability to be small and quiet and invisible. That night, Dakota asked if she would walk with him. They strolled along the river as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. He spoke slowly, choosing his words with care. He told her he had lost his first wife to illness 2 winters before. He had thought his heart would remain frozen forever. But when he saw Sarah, something awakened. She carried sadness in her eyes, a hurt he recognized. He wanted to know if perhaps, with time, she might consider staying. Not as a captive or a servant, but as a woman who chose to build a new life among his people. Sarah's throat tightened with emotion. She wanted to say yes immediately, but caution held her back. She had made one terrible choice in marrying Thomas, ignoring warning signs in favor of romantic fantasy. How could she trust her judgment now? Dakota seemed to understand her hesitation. He assured her there was no pressure, no expectation. If she chose to leave with the trading party, he would accept her decision. But if she chose to stay, he would give her time to heal, to learn, to decide if this life could truly become hers. Sarah spent a sleepless night wrestling with her decision. The logical choice was clear: return to Omaha with the traders, find steady work, rebuild her life among her own people. But her heart pulled stubbornly in another direction. Toward this community that had welcomed her without judgment, toward Winona's easy friendship, toward Dakota's patient kindness. Toward a future that terrified her precisely because it offered something she had stopped believing existed: genuine care and respect. When Buck's party prepared to leave the next morning, Sarah made her choice. She would stay, at least for a time. Buck was skeptical, warning her again of the difficulties ahead, but he respected her decision. He promised to check on her when his trading routes brought him back through the territory in a few months. If she wanted to leave then, he would take her. The escape route eased some of Sarah's anxiety. This did not have to be permanent. She could try this new life and change her mind if it proved too difficult. The Lakota welcomed her decision with genuine warmth. Chief Makawee himself spoke to her through Winona's translation, telling her she was under the tribe's protection now. Any harm to her would be treated as harm to his own family. The formal declaration brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Protection. The word felt sacred after years of living unprotected in her own home. Winona helped Sarah set up a small teepee of her own, close to the family lodges. Dakota had been clear that he would not rush or pressure her, and having her own space honored that promise. Sarah appreciated the respect more than she could express. In Boston, propriety had been used as a weapon to control her. Here, genuine concern for her well-being guided social customs. Learning Lakota ways proved both challenging and rewarding. Sarah struggled with the language, her tongue tripping over unfamiliar sounds. But the women taught her patiently, laughing with her rather than at her when she made mistakes. She learned to prepare pemmican, to construct and repair teepees, to identify useful plants. Her hands, once soft from Boston drawing rooms, grew calloused and strong. She discovered she liked the physical work, the tangible results of her labor. Dakota courted her with traditional respect. He brought her gifts: a warm buffalo robe, a beautifully beaded pair of moccasins made by his sister, fresh meat from his hunts. He visited her each evening, sitting outside her teepee to talk as the camp settled for the night. His patience amazed her. He never pushed for more than she was ready to give. Slowly, through these quiet conversations under the stars, Sarah's defensive walls began to crumble. She told him about Thomas one night, the words spilling out in a rush of pain and shame. She expected judgment or pity. Instead, Dakota listened with steady attention. When she finished, he spoke of the Lakota belief that some men had twisted spirits, that their violence was a sickness that said nothing about the worth of those they harmed. Sarah carried no shame for surviving, he told her firmly. Her courage in escaping and beginning again marked her as strong, not weak. Those words healed something deep inside her. For 3 years, she had internalized Thomas's accusations, believing herself inadequate and deserving of punishment. Dakota's perspective offered liberation from that poisonous narrative. She was not broken. She was a survivor, capable and resilient. The shift in her self-understanding changed everything. As summer deepened, Sarah found herself flourishing in ways she had never imagined possible. She laughed freely with the women as they worked. She played with the children, who taught her games and words with patient enthusiasm. She participated in ceremonies she didn't fully understand but found deeply moving. The spiritual connection the Lakota maintained with the land and sky resonated with something in her soul that years of proper Boston religion had never touched. Her feelings for Dakota grew steadily. She noticed the way other women looked at him with admiration, the respect he commanded among the warriors, the gentleness he showed to children and elders. But more than his standing in the community, she valued the man he was with her. Patient, kind, genuinely interested in her thoughts and feelings. He made her laugh. He listened when she spoke. He never raised his voice in anger or made her afraid. The contrast with Thomas could not have been sharper. When autumn painted the hills gold and red, Sarah finally acknowledged what her heart had known for weeks. She loved Dakota. Not the desperate, fearful love she had once mistaken for devotion to Thomas, but something solid and true. Love built on respect, patience, and genuine partnership. She still carried scars from her marriage, moments when a sudden movement made her flinch, nights when nightmares pulled her from sleep. But Dakota met her trauma with understanding, never taking offense, always giving her space to heal. The evening she told him she was ready to marry, his joy was profound. But even then, he insisted on following proper customs. He approached Chief Makawee formally, offering horses as a bride price to honor Sarah even though she had no family to negotiate with. The chief accepted on her behalf, blessing their union. The ceremony itself was beautiful in its simplicity. They stood before the community wrapped together in a single blanket, symbolizing their joined lives. Elders spoke prayers for their happiness and fertility. Women sang traditional songs. Sarah felt the significance of every ritual, even though she didn't fully comprehend. Married life brought new adjustments. Moving into Dakota's lodge meant sharing space in ways that initially frightened her. But he remained patient, understanding that intimacy had to be rebuilt carefully after what she had endured. He taught her that marriage could be a partnership of equals, that her voice and opinions mattered. When they disagreed, they talked rather than fought. When she struggled, he supported rather than criticized. The revolutionary idea that a husband could be a true companion rather than a master transformed Sarah's understanding of what love could mean. Winter arrived fierce and cold. Sarah learned the challenges of surviving harsh weather in a teepee, but she also discovered the warmth of community support. When supplies ran low, families shared. When someone fell ill, others provided care. The contrast with Boston society, where neighbors barely acknowledged each other beyond polite nods, struck her repeatedly. Despite having less material wealth, the Lakota lived richer lives in ways that mattered most. By spring, Sarah was pregnant. The news filled her with conflicting emotions. Part of her rejoiced at the prospect of becoming a mother. But another part remembered Thomas's rages, his unpredictability, and feared bringing a child into a world that could be so cruel. Dakota sensed her anxiety and spoke to her with characteristic wisdom. Their child would grow up knowing only love and respect, he promised. Would learn strength and kindness from both parents. Would never witness violence or fear in their home. His certainty soothed her fears. Winona and the other women surrounded Sarah with support as her pregnancy progressed. They shared knowledge about childbirth, prepared necessary supplies, promised to attend her when her time came. The collective care moved Sarah deeply. She had faced so much alone in her previous life. Now she was part of something larger, held up by dozens of hands and hearts. Her daughter was born on a clear morning in early summer, with Winona and 2 elder midwives attending. The birth was difficult, but Sarah drew on reserves of strength she had built through her year among the Lakota. When her daughter's first cry filled the teepee, Sarah wept with overwhelming love. Dakota entered shortly after, his face awestruck as he held his daughter for the first time. They named her Wikapi, meaning star, because she had brought new light into both their lives. As Sarah nursed her daughter that first night, Dakota sleeping nearby, she reflected on the impossible journey that had brought her here. She had escaped hell and found not just survival, but true belonging. Her life with the Lakota was not easy. Winters were harsh, food could be scarce, conflicts with settlers were increasing. But she faced these challenges as part of a community, with a partner who valued her, surrounded by people who had embraced her as one of their own. Sometimes she thought about Thomas and wondered if he had looked for her, if he still raged at her disappearance. But those thoughts came less frequently now, holding less power. That life belonged to someone else, a frightened woman who no longer existed. Sarah had been transformed by her escape, by the kindness of strangers who became family, by a man who had shown her that love could heal rather than destroy. She kissed her daughter's head and looked around the teepee at her improbable life. This was home now, truly home in a way Boston never had been. She had traveled thousands of miles and crossed into another world entirely. The journey had required courage she hadn't known she possessed, but every difficult step had been worth it. She had escaped her living hell, and found not just refuge, but joy, purpose, and a love that honored rather than diminished her. As Wikapi's tiny hand curled around her finger, Sarah smiled. This was what love truly meant, what family really looked like. And she would spend the rest of her life grateful for the desperate flight that had brought her here, to this wild beautiful country, to these people, to this man who had shown her that she deserved nothing less than complete devotion and respect.